Hey guys, today we're talking about image management. Now, when it comes to image management, there's a few questions we can ask ourselves to get started. First of all, how do people perceive us? This can be a really tricky thing to figure out because most people don't like giving feedback. I think this comes back to the fact that most of us don't like to hear feedback. We don't like to know those negative things about ourselves. But knowing this kind of feedback is actually going to help us improve. Another way that we can figure out how people perceive us is to sit around and think about some of those negative things that people have said to us in the past. A lot of the times they hurt because we know they're real and we just aren't ready to accept them yet. If we can think back to that bad coworker, that person in school, people from any part of our lives that say something negative to us, if we start thinking, how are they valid? We can start to understand some of the different ways that people might perceive us. We can begin to think about some of those people in our own lives that we don't like as well. Why is it that we don't like that person? What is it specifically about what they do that make us kind of cringe or look a certain way at what they're doing and how they're doing it? From there, we can ask, how do we want to be perceived? How do we want people to see us? That's going to tell us a lot about ourselves and some of our hidden motives as well. If we sit there and think about both of these questions, we're going to get pretty close. We can ask some people close to us as well. We can ask them if we come across how we want to come across. We can ask them how we are actually coming across. And hopefully between those bits and pieces, we can start to get a real picture of what we're actually doing, how we're really coming across, and maybe even some ways to fix how what it is we're doing and how we are being perceived by other people. The next thing is, does it even matter? That's the biggest question. Does it matter how we're coming across? Does our image really matter at the end of the day? Or is it more important the work that we're doing and how that work is coming across? Is it better to be looked at a certain way or to have a certain level and standard in our actual work? Now, for some people, the image is way more important. For other people, it's the work. Some of us, maybe most of us, are kind of in the middle, a little mix. Well, most of us are going to be a little mix of the both of them. Let's be real. Let's try and figure out which side we're trying to be on, which side we're naturally going to get drawn to. And then again, ask, does that really matter? I kind of want to see it this way, though. Do we want to be truthful or do we want to tell people lies? Most times that I've heard people most of the times I've heard people talk about image management, they talk about our appearance, they talk about our behavior, they talk about our communication, they talk about how we're perceived digitally. All of this stuff is how we're fronting to other people. It's almost like not the golden age, the honeymoon phase with dating somebody. We want to see them a certain way. We're going to be on our best behavior, all of that kind of garbage. Do we really need that, or do we just want to be more real? I think that the older that we get, the more we move on our timeline of life, the more that this stuff cuts away. And I think I've heard it said before that by 60, you start to realize that these people we thought had ideas about us weren't even thinking about us in the first place. If we can begin there now at these much younger ages, how much of an advantage are we going to have? How about we start to actually work on ourselves? So this is my way of dealing with image management. Here's how you actually have some character and some morals, and here's some things you can do to change how people really truly perceive you, but to also change how you perceive yourself, because we can't fool ourselves. First of all, we've got communication. Now, with communication, I've said now again, I hate that I say now so much. The first thing with our communication is how we're being interpreted. We're not talking for ourselves, hopefully. We're talking to try and communicate with other people. So we need to think about how the words that we're using, how the different places that we go have different styles of communication, and how the other person is interpreting, how they're hearing these things that we're putting out there. Sometimes we might have a word that we think means a certain thing, but we can know full well that the other person hears this word in a different way. So how about we take the time to find a better way to say this? For me, one of my favorite examples of this is condescend. Now, back in the day, condescend used to mean you're actually at a higher level than someone, you bring it down and you meet them on their level. But these days, as most of you are thinking right now, condescend feels like someone up in a tower talking down at you. That's actually not what the word used to mean. Now, if I'm sitting there talking to somebody who thinks that condescending is a bad thing, and I'm thinking that condescending is coming down and being on the same level as somebody, just that word alone is going to cause a big problem in our communication. We need to start to look more closely at other people and try and understand how we're actually being interpreted. That's what this whole thing's about. Communication is just about this two-way conversation. It's not just literally giving a TED talk to people. It's not talking at people. It's not condescending this way. It should be coming down to where they're at and meeting them there. Our communication should be serving the other person. It should be inclusive. All of our communication should be about bringing people in. It should be about building a tribe. The more people that we can bring into that circle, the language that we can have that's the best and the most modern and understood for everybody, the more that we can literally use the words of the group that we're with, because that can change depending where we're at, the better we're going to be at communicating, the better that we're going to be perceived, and perfect image management. The next thing, and a hard one for me sometimes, is the pacing. Some of us talk really, really, really quickly. Some of us talk so slowly that it feels like nails on a chalkboard. I don't know where you guys fit into that, but if we can think about how we're using our pacing is much more important than being really fast or really slow. If we're going from a faster speed to slowing down to really make our points, to really show people what actually matters, we're going to be communicating in a much better and a much more efficient and effective way. That's going to help all of us come into this tribe together. The next thing to think about, or another thing to think about, is our, what I call indexing, or our order of things. Now, for me, telling a story, I jump around so much that I must have ADHD. I've got so much energy that it can be hard for other people sometimes to follow where I'm going and where I'm up to. Especially with certain people, I know that I need to make sure I've got that order laid out completely perfectly, or they can get lost very easily with the pace that I go at. So another very important part of our communication is figuring out that order, figuring out exactly how we're going to spit this stuff out so these other people can come on the journey with us. Again, our communication is just about inclusion and building our circles bigger. If we can look at communication that way, our image is going to get better every single day, because this is something that we can improve every single conversation. The next thing that we can think about is our personal culture. Now, this is our morals, and I'm saying morals as our principles or our rules of right conduct. We've all got things that we look at, things that we hold on to as more important than others. These are the way that we figure out and build our actual personal culture. These are how we build our morals. It's basically what we expect. We need to be giving what we're expecting. We can't have it's really easy to end up with one standard for us and another standard for everybody else. Now, some of us are harsher on ourselves and easier on other people. Some of us are much, much harsher on other people and very lackadaisy on ourselves. The tricky thing here is, as soon as we get into that negative space, as soon as we've got an excuse to be a certain way, we're almost always going to take it. I don't know many people that when they're hangry, when they're tired, when they're stressed, when they're pushed, when they're sick, when they've got something going on in their family, even better when all of this is going on at once, I don't know too many people that don't get very snappy, but I know that almost everyone I talk to gets very, very offended when some stranger snaps at them in the grocery line or whatever line they're waiting in, or whoever it is. We need to try and have these standards the same. We need to try and balance this out as best we can. Again, just like the communication, the more that we practice this, the easier it's going to get. That's how we build our personal culture. We start to show everybody else what we expect of them, and they usually begin to rise to the occasion or disappear. We need to be ready, willing, and able, that's a thing I'm liking to say today, to do the exact same thing ourselves. If we expect people to show up on time, we need to start doing our best to show up well before time every time if that's a problem for us. If we want other people to give us more grace, more opportunity, more humility from themselves towards us, then we need to be just trying everything we can to put ourselves into other people's shoes so that we can be extending that same kind of grace to everybody else. If we start living like this, we're going to attract the same kind of crowd around us, and the stronger that our personal culture is, the stronger we're going to be seen, and the more we're going to trust just ourselves. It's going to grow us. That's my last point for this one. But where I was going with this is, this personal culture becomes the core of who we are. The core of who we are our beliefs. These are our truths. This is how we actually have confidence in ourselves. If we set a standard for ourselves and we miss that, it can be so hard to not beat ourselves up over and over and over for missing our own mark. The more that we can trust ourselves, the more that we're going to just achieve in life. The easier it's going to be, the more good days we're going to have, and the less the less of an impact the bad days are going to have on us, because we know our track record. We know what we've been doing, and we know that the next day we can get back on track. This is true discipline. If we can figure out what we believe, what's true, and what we expect of ourselves, and hit that as much as possible, it's so much easier to give ourselves a little bit of slack for those down times, for those negative times, for when every storm of life seems to hit all at once. This improves our self-image, which is going to improve our image in every single realm. If we start with ourselves, if we start in our own minds and in our own hearts and work out what we think, what we want, and what we expect, boom, of ourselves, boom, that's going to come across to every other person we meet. It's almost like a force that people can feel. It's like someone on the weekend just said, it's almost like having a closed book and an open book. If we're living like an open book, if we're living in total truth, if we're doing everything we can to fix ourselves, people just feel that. People can tell that. When we're a closed book, when we're trying to put up a fake image, a lot of people can just tell that that's there. A lot of people know, especially younger children. I don't know how they know this stuff, but it's right there. It's almost like you can smell it. The next thing that we've got to think about when we're thinking of our core and our beliefs, and one of the biggest hindrances that I think I used to have personally, is all of our external influencers. Now, we've got our media, we've got our tech, we've got the way that we use our phones, we've got the things that we read. The way that we think is the way that we are. I know I'm stealing that cliche from somewhere. If we can work out what's coming in, we're going to have a very, very good chance of guessing what's going to come out. If we can put in the right thing, we're going to get I'm just thinking of a Nutri-Grain ad. You only get out what you put in. If you don't put in the right stuff, just like a computer program, you're only going to get the wrong thing out. If you're putting in the wrong thing, you can't expect the right thing. If you're putting in the right thing, you can expect exactly what it is you want. If you want to be a certain kind of person, don't watch, don't entertain, don't read about, don't behave like the things you don't want to hold yourself to. If you're not congruent, if you're not putting in what you want out, every single time you're going to end up with a bad reaction. You're going to end up with the things you don't want. You're going to be on a downward spiral, and it is so hard to dig yourself out of that. Basically, here's what we want to be. We want to be completely authentic. If we can be authentic, we can trust ourselves. If we can trust ourselves, we're going to be careful out in the public. If we're careful out in the public, we're happy to slow down and speed up exactly where necessary. We're not going to rush for anyone, and a lot of those anger and resentful feelings are just going to start to disappear because we're going to start being considerate. Once we're considerate, we can definitely be deliberate, and once we're deliberate, we can literally figure out any image, any way that we want to be in the public, because it's all going to come from the inside. If every change comes from the inside, we can guarantee that it's going to last and that it's going to make a much bigger impact on the people around us. Next, we're going to just become a coach, and everyone around us is going to need to step up. Otherwise, again, it's going to hurt so much, they're just going to disappear. I don't like that, but that's just how it is. Trust me, step up and you'll be surprised the people that actually hang around. It sounds scary the way that I've just laid it out. Be authentic, be real, be careful, be deliberate, be considerate. You'll completely nail life, and you'll go much, much further than you think you ever could. Practice each of these little steps every day, and again, even just by the end of the year, even just 3 to 6 months, it'll be amazing what you can do. If you add truth to that, within a month, you can be a completely different person. I've done it myself. You can go look at some of my socials and you'll see some of these changes. That's all I did. I just started being true and looking for the truth. You guys got this. Have a great day.